Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
All right, Fast Leader Legion, pull back on that camel. We're going to have a great day today. Carol Borghesi's with us. She has really a depth of knowledge that I hope I can continue to tap into for the next decade or so while she still wants to have time with me. But I get to share her with you today, and it's going to be fun. Carol is actually a graduate of the Marketing and Management program from the British Columbia Institute of Technology, and she has 31 years of experience in telecommunications spanning 3 continents. She concluded her career at TELUS as the Senior Vice President of their Customer First culture. In this role, Carol was a passionate advocate across TELUS for their customers first in 2010 and was the driving force behind the evolution of TELUS's corporate culture to deliver on the future is friendly to clients. Carol has held several senior roles in sales, service, business unit management, and has successfully managed change through deregulation, labor relations, consolidations, acquisitions, and rapid technological innovation. Carol is a recognized expert in contact centers, customer service operations, and customer experience leadership in complex multi-channel environments. In her career, she has had responsibilities leading more than 50,000 employees and has served well over 150 million customers. She's currently writing a book about how to put customers first, and profit for fun. Hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that fun piece. And she also speaks internationally and loves working with like-minded organizations that believe the age of customer capitalism is now. Carol Borghesi, we're glad to have you. Are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I have never been more ready for anything in my entire life, buoyed by that Las Vegas show lounge kind of introduction, Jim. My gosh, I'm exhausted listening to my own career, for heaven's sakes.
As you can see, you know why Carol and I love to have conversations. We have a good time. It's something that always leads to another interaction that's going to be even better. All right. So, Carol, I've given our listeners a brief introduction, but can you please tell us what your current passion is so that we can actually get to know you a little bit better?
Well, I want to say, actually, listening to the background on the career I've had, there's 3 things that I wanted to really call out to the listeners. One is that, given that I've been working for more than 30 years, started at a very young age, obviously. One of the things that I ran into, Jim, is I was often the first woman to be in a particular role. I was first woman that was on management boards and so on. I want to call that out because I think that that's really important to today's world of work as well. That much has been done in the past to create greater diversity and focus, but we still got a long way to go. And I really benefited, I think, from being an early pioneer, which really sounds ages me even more. Pioneers, circle the wagons. The second thing that really characterized my career for me was transformation. I was in an industry that has transformed beyond recognition, going from monopoly to very, very competitive. And I tell you, I got the bug around managing change respectfully pretty early on in my career. It's something that continues to excite me and invigorate me. And I would add to that I am so excited by the developments that I've seen in social media, as well as the rise of the millennial generation. I think that people coming up in the world of work are just fab. The third thing is that I have been really lucky because I've worked in sales, marketing, and service. And those are kind of the usual suspects when it comes to the work that I do, which is around customer experience. And I'm thrilled to tell you that I think a lot of the customer experience is a team sport, which involves the entire organization, even beyond those 3 functional areas, is really coming into its own right now. And that's what's getting me excited and passionate about running Customers First Culture, the little company that I founded and am the principal for.
I almost have to say to myself, Carol, let's turn back the clock a little bit because we definitely need you as that path paver for many other women I mean, you really were a pioneer. I mean, I know you weren't in the wagon. You're not that old. However, you actually have been one of those who've been in the forefront in a lot of ways, and that's why I'm so glad to have you on the show, is so that you can continue to do just that, help pave the path for others, teach us how we can get ahead faster by learning from you. So, with that, we often find in the Fast Leader Show where we need some inspiration, and we like looking to leadership quotes in order to get some of that inspiration. Now, I know you are an avid reader. You always seek to, move things forward, and you probably have had a lot of influences in your life. But is there one quote that kind of stands out to you as a driving force that kind of always plays over in your head that, you enjoy? Could you share that with us?
I certainly can. And I did a little bit of research on a quote that I've got to say has guided and probably influenced my career and approach to work many, many years ago. And that is, whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And that was back in the olden days, attributed to Goethe, which is Johann Goethe, a famous and very, very prolific, as well as a terrific writer, philosopher, poet. But it actually was coined by W.H. Murray, who was a Scotsman. And it was in connection with mountain climbing, which was what his particular passion was. I think that's as relevant today, certainly in the phase that I am in my career, as it was when I was a youngster just getting started. It is action focused. I love that it reflects boldness. I love that it opens one up to the possibilities. I know that feeling of being the only one in the room that can see it, where you kind of get the Mirage Award. You can see it, but no one else can. And sometimes that's kind of lonely, but I've got to say that it's been immensely rewarding. And it has also spurred me on to learn and continue to dream and to grow. I may have been a pathfinder for women back in the day, but I can say that with absolute clarity and conviction that I continue to learn at a greater pace now than I ever did in my career, probably because I know now what I don't know.
That's a really interesting point that you have made there, as far as the velocity of the learning. I mean, what would you necessarily, attribute that to? I mean, is there something that kind of stands out to you that says, that's one of the reasons why it is that way? Is it just because we've had so much information, or is it something else?
I think that it's certainly a reflection of the society, the advent of the internet, the explosion of the information society that we're in. But I also actually think it's personal. I think there's some people are lifelong learners. And I think, however, when you get to be the age that I am so old, by the way. I think they've discontinued my blood type, for crying out loud. But it's almost a life stage kind of thing where I now realize that there's so much happening and so much to learn from. I'd say there's humility in that, Jim. And I can't always claim that I was the most humble leader. I have occasionally dipped in and out of believing my own press. And that's generally what's prevented me from pricking up my ears and learning from others.
I think we've all had a taste of that to some degree. I don't think there'd be any forward movement if we didn't experience that. And, there's a lot of humps that we all have to get over. We call them humps here on the Fast Leader Show. And, as I've chatted with you before about, we're kind of trying to, our mission is kind of redefining what leadership is and what it means. And I think you, just in telling your story at this point, have really made it very clear that a lot of it entails leading of self. And if you think about it just from that perspective, we're all leaders. And the nature of work today requires that we all become better at that. The individual who's sitting there out on a proverbial island having to take care of certain responsibilities for our organization has to do a lot of leading of self, leading of project timelines, leading of their own career advancement. A lot of times I had talked to employees and they're like, well, what are you going to give me as an employee, as a company, to help me get ahead? And I'm like, well, first of all, you need to fix your mindset and think, what do I need to do? And it's not going to be handed to you. You have to take your own initiative, take your own strength from that and move forward. So that's an important point. I know there's a lot of humps, and you talk about path paving. You talked about a lot of different things within your career, but is there a particular story that kind of stands out that was a defining moment that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that sometimes, well, actually, let me put it another way. I did learn early and often that it's not okay to be right if you're all by yourself. And to say that that I had a very inflated opinion of my own intellect would be, characteristic of one of my wonder years, let me say. But the hump that I really wanted to share with you today is I spent a lot of time working in customer service. Customer service, as I've said to you, Jim, before, is the drip tray of the organization. It ain't somewhere that you get a lot of credit or kudos. Your mom and dad didn't say, gee, I hope he goes to school and becomes a customer service professional. And I puzzled over that for the longest time. I really finally kind of realized that I could spend all day long trying to yell ever louder at a customer service organization and wouldn't get anywhere. Kind of like, how you raise your voice volume when you're talking to somebody that doesn't speak English, as though that's the problem. So it dawned on me that I had an enterprise change issue on my hands. And that's really daunting, because sitting in customer service, you are a particular function in the organization, not necessarily always at the table. And it wasn't until I reached the last company that I worked with that I really saw the way through to overcome the issue. First and foremost, I wanted to say that when I finally got it, that customer experience, which includes customer service, is a team sport. That's when I really started to get some traction. And I took an approach which said that nobody is exempt from the team sport of customer experience. And I seriously mean that. I don't care if you're an internal audit or the security guard, you can find your way back to customer experience in the way that you impact that. The second thing that I realized and was able to work on was that the front line of an organization has as much to contribute to the executives of an organization as the other way around. We often think about executives being the liberators of those that work in jobs that are closer to the customer and generally not as lucrative, let's say. What I saw was really understanding that instead of trying to get the executive to preach to the front line, I brought the executive to the front line and actually let them teach the executive a thing or two about the reality of what it's like to deal with customers when you don't have all the tools and information that you need. The third thing that happened was kind of a strength of conviction. I worked with an extremely talented guy on a framework called likelihood to recommend. And I've talked to you about this, Jim, before. You remember that. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I got a lot of stick over the likelihood to recommend framework, which is incredibly simple notion. It's based on the fact that likelihood to recommend is kind of the highest order intermingling of a customer and a company's brand. So that if I'm going to recommend you, that's really putting my reputation on the line as well. The problem arose when dealing with a lot of engineering and finance types that the math, let me put it that way, behind the framework that I'd created was honestly subject to what could amount to ridicule. I had to walk through that and stand my ground. It was really helpful. I learned a lot about being able to manage information that was performance-based as well as customer information and employee information. And the good news is that singular focus of likelihood to recommend and understanding what drives likelihood to recommend really did carry the day. And the last thing, the most interesting thing, was I realized that there's a big difference between how we perceive others, which we generally perceive by their behaviors, versus how we perceive ourselves, which is generally by our intentions. And one of the things that I learned firsthand was that in asking this group of executives to spend some time with Frontline, after they had that experience, asked them two questions. The first question was, to what degree do you think our company puts customers first? About 41% of the executives, remembering these are the guys that run the place, said 42%. So that's not very good. It's less than half. But When I asked them, to what degree do you personally put customers first, a whopping 82% claimed that they, in fact, put customers first. Big moment, because that really helped everybody understand there's no darn way that a company could be filled with such customer-oriented executives and not be customer-focused. So that individual responsibility is what builds the company responsibility. And that was an incredibly exciting breakthrough that I got with the last company I worked with.
Now, I know that force is not something that a woman who's sitting there with probably a bunch of old telecom engineers running a business and trying to talk to them about customer service is something that would work. So how were you able to essentially crack the nut, get over the hump, and with them, how did you actually move things forward? What did you do specifically as a person, as an individual? What things did you learn throughout the course of your working on different continents that you had to do or do differently in order to really have that impact and effect?
Well, for listeners of my vintage, I'm sure they won't be surprised to know that I did try the force approach. What I perceived coming out of business school was kind of a tough stance and so on. And since I'm often referred to as the man my parents wanted me to marry, I guess it's not totally surprising I take kind of a male approach. I got over that, but what really worked in the end was I realized that the CEO of an organization is a really critical player, and we often look to the CEO to provide direction. What I worked out is that CEOs are in fact waiting for their teams to take up the gauntlet, particularly of customer experience. And I learned that actually understanding and meeting the uncertainties and concerns that the CEO or the C-suite had was really important. That actually led to, believe it or not, critical mass. And I think that in the end is what I've learned, is that critical mass, you get a momentum, Jim, that starts to turn the tide in an organization. Does it help to have the CEO on site? Absolutely. But in the end, you don't need force. You need actually to tap into what arguably is a very popular concept with people right across any organization, and to really start to make that a tipping point. You don't need to force anything. And I suppose in that too, you realize that actually, any one person really isn't going to make anything happen in any organization, truth be told, however much we'd like to think of it that way. And when you see that bringing people on, giving them the opportunity to express their views and create that informal network in an organization, bingo, that's really what made the difference.
Now, you had mentioned something about the current work that you're doing. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
My next assignment is really, really terrific. It's in the UK. I'm going to be working on developing a customer contact operation for a business that represents 23 manufacturers and 74 dealers in the automotive industry. And it's a juicy one in the sense that there's a lot of complexity in trying to manage that many stakeholders who have varying degrees of customer relationship management systems, everything from back of a cocktail napkin to very sophisticated, but equally quite territorial and protective of customer information. And I think that I'll be spending a little bit of the spring and summer in the UK.
Oh, there could be things that are a lot worse than that. We wish you the best, and we hope it goes well for you. Now we transition to the rapid part of our show, and that is the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Carol Borghesi, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Carol, are you ready to hoe down?
I am ready to hoe down.
All right. All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being yet an even better leader today?
This may be considered oversharing, ladies and gentlemen, but the absolute honest truth, procrastination. It is something that is a personal trait of mine. 2015 is about working on procrastination for me.
There you go. Onward and upward faster, right? Okay. So what's the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Bring more of who you are to your work.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I am, as you mentioned earlier, a voracious and eclectic reader. I read across a very broad spectrum of topics. My family despairs because I read economics books for pleasure. I do have the usual suspects of the Economist, the Harvard Business Review, but novels and pretty weighty tomes on neuroscience. It's pretty broad.
Well, we don't want to necessarily constrict you to one particular genre or topic type, but is there a book that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yes, there is. This was very easy for me to think of, but it's very difficult for me to convey because we have a family show. The book that I want to recommend to your readers has an extremely rude word in it. The book is by Robert Sutton. He's an organizational behaviorist professor and quite prolific. And he wrote a book called The No A Rule. And so you can fill in the gap there. The reason that I think that's the best business book that I ever read is it calls out categorically the definition of a person that could, frankly, earn that particular title. And the reality is that, according to Robert Sutton, when you're in the presence of one of those, you come away from that interaction feeling somehow diminished. I love that definition. I strive not to be labeled in that manner and way. But it made me pretty savvy for spotting those that are in the organizations and dealing with them accordingly.
Unless, of course, you're one of my three brothers, and then that was my nickname growing up. All right. Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate that. We're going to give links to that book and a couple others on our show notes page. If you want to find out where that is, I'll give it to you. It's right here. It's at fastleader.net / Carol Borghesi. All right, Carol. Now we've come to the last question on our Hump Day Hoedown. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and you were 25 years old again, and there's no more wagons. And you were supposed to begin a new job as a manager of a team that is underperforming and disengaged. But you have retained all the knowledge and skill that you currently have. Your job, of course, is to turn them around. So you get up, you head out to work. What do you do now?
Well, there's three things that I would do. The first of which is to look at the operational data of the team that I'm responsible for. And you may think that that's not very people-y, but I'll tell you that the three areas that I would look at for operational information is the performance data of the function. What do we do and what's our output and what's it costing? The second would be the customer feedback, whether that's an internal team or an external facing team. And the third would be any engagement information that I can glean. Armed with that data, I would go and talk to people. I would talk to absolutely everybody. And I would take the time to, I think, do what probably is one of the most important skills that I learned, which is to listen carefully and openly. Having the data in my head and in my hands means I can ask some interesting questions to start to understand why we may be having the issues that we're having in the team's performance. And then the last thing I would do is I would observe. I would go and walk my business. I would look at what's going on. And the reason that I would do that is because what people tell you that they do and what they actually do can often be different. So with those three elements together, I think would form the first few days of my time with my new team.
I think all of those contribute to what you even mentioned that you were a voracious one of, and that's reading. You're reading the business, you're reading the information before you take an action. Carol Borghesi, it was an honor spending time with you today. Can you please share with Fast Leader listeners how they can connect with you?
You certainly can. I am available at clborghesi, same spelling, at gmail.com. And I'll even give my mobile number, if that's okay, 778-866-9048. I'm also on LinkedIn and would love to hear from your listeners.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.